I'm just going to tell three little building stories, and then we're going to move off courthouse renovations and constructions, because, honest, we could spend forever. It's a subject very dear to my heart. I'll tell you first about, well, you know of my interest in children and families and family courts, so two of the three buildings I'm going to tell you about are family courts, although all three relate to families and children. The first is the story of the Queens County Family Court, which was an unusually shabby building, unusually shabby, and we have many shabby buildings. But this one was really bad, and I remember we were planning a renovation of the family court in Queens when one day I visited with the then county executive, Claire Shulman. We were riding up in the elevator, and the elevator got stuck. Now, the Queens County Family Court, we ultimately obviously got out, but it was sort of symbolic of the building, and I think it's one of the courthouses that was not originally a courthouse, that was like a library, or that the court system took over, which is not a good start, and we have other facilities like that we could talk about, like the civil court in Kings County, but let's stay with the family court in Queens County. We completed our tour, Claire Shulman and I, and Claire Shulman said to me, "Honest, Judith, why are you renovating this building? This building is awful. Why don't you get a new building?" Wow, okay, I can't remember any other executive saying that to me, but it didn't take more than a minute for me to accept that offer. And we proceeded with the Queens County Family Court House, which is very, very beautiful, but I want to linger a moment on that because I remember so well our time with building it and dedicating it and all of the above, and again, dealing with the architect. And I remember the words he said to me that forever stung and stuck in my mind as he was so excitedly taking me through the building and showing me that the central concept of that building is organized around beautiful waiting areas. I say I will never, never forget that. To me, that was such a challenge. They are beautiful, and they are full, as the waiting areas always are in our family courts, regrettably, because the calendars are so huge. What seemed so sad and so tragic, I was happy that he did it. They're windows that look out on park areas, and there's a commodious space. It's a lot that families can gather there while they're waiting for the interminable calendars. But it saddens me to think that a courthouse has to be designed around waiting areas. I just wish that we're not so, that our backlogs were not so great, that the needs of the families were not so great. Waiting is not what you should be doing in a courthouse. So I just mention that because it's sad. On a happier note, the courthouse in Manhattan, 60 Lafayette, the family court, it had sort of a fortress, if you wanted to be kind, prison-like look. It was, I cannot imagine whatever led people to do that for a family court. So off-putting, so this dark kind of marble facade with tiny windows, really, really prison-like. And I was thrilled when the day came that we could do as major a project as we could do down there. Obviously, we weren't going to take down the building. Not a good message for a family court, which should be open and inviting to the families that have to be there. But today, 60 Lafayette looks a lot better than it did before the renovation. And I say I could go on and on, but I said I was going to tell you a final story, and so I've told one kind of said, they're all happy because we have better buildings, but the third one is kind of a mixed note, and that is what's called the Tweed Courthouse, which does bother me every time I go down to City Hall. The Tweed Courthouse was erected as a courthouse. Now I've told you about a family court building that was put up as a library and then we occupied it, or the Brooklyn Civil Court, which was an office building, and then we occupied it. It's just not as good. A courthouse has special design needs. and functions best when a courthouse is designed as a courthouse. The Tweed Courthouse is a courthouse. The Tweed Courthouse was designed as a courthouse. It stands as a courthouse. Regrettably, Mayor Bloomberg decided not to house the commercial division of the Supreme Court there, as I had hoped he would, but to put his very, very, very top priority there, and that was the Department of Education. So today, what is a courthouse and is designed as a beautiful courthouse functions as the situs of the New York City Department of Education. So I'll end on that note, because otherwise we could be here for days. Already so many other facilities have cropped up in my mind, so I encourage you strongly, please, to ask me another question before I go off on one of those.
There are so many projects you started or were involved with, Judge. I'm going to mention just a couple, and maybe you can tell us a bit about what they are and your involvement with them. Fair Trial Free Press.
That was started by one of my predecessors, Stanley Fold. That would have been many, many decades ago. An excellent project, appealed to me tremendously, especially as a journalist. I've talked to you and mentioned my sadness that there is not greater public consciousness about the courts. So if I describe that as a disappointment and a sadness, you can imagine how utterly devastating it is that we can't get the interest of the press in really knowledgeable reporting of the courts. I'm so sad. If you break your leg, you can get an article. I once had a tattoo that somebody put on just at a Liberty game, you know, something you can wash off, and that got in the paper. You know, it has to be something kind of absurd or something that really hurts people. If it's really hurtful, you can even get on the front page. But just at one point in the Times, David Margolick did a column called At the Bar. Really good, but we never got that kind of sustained coverage. Yes, the Supreme Court of the United States, the rock stars, yes, but overwhelmingly the business of the people is carried on in other courts, and it's just not important enough for the press unless somebody breaks a leg as a result of court intervention, right? But anyway, this idea started by Stanley Fold was to bring together journalists and judges and lawyers around issues of free press. And it was a very successful enterprise. We did it once a year. We had a great symposium, very actively endorsed by Harry Rosenfeld, who was at the Albany Times-Union. Harry really, goodness, I remember his telephone number. So that was going for a long time with a very active support of the Albany Times-Union, and then Rex Smith, who stepped in for Harry Rosenfeld. Rex stepped in as the editor. And so we, every year, would gather around a hypothetical, and we even got to holding these sessions at a beautiful center at NYU Law School. And Judge Rosenblatt and I would kind of conspire and work these things out, and at the end of each one we would say, yeah, I think that gets maybe a B+, maybe an A-. You know, they were good, lively discussions. I'm very pleased. Every year I was a friend of Peter Jennings, and every year I go down to the Constitution Center where the Annenberg Foundation supports a program where journalists are exposed to, this is constitutional law. I think it was a very good idea to do it. It took a lot of effort, and somehow we sort of slipped in the past year or so, but it's good. We should go back to it. We should, because it was a very nice opportunity to exchange views with journalists, and while we would do it in New York City, we even had thought for a while of branching out to other parts of the state, and ran a counterpart in Syracuse once with the help of the Syracuse paper. So each thing like this takes a lot of effort, and in a time when the courts are so stressed, putting the effort into something that isn't related to the disposition of the dockets of cases, it's very hard to get that going.
Yeah, I'm sorry to move completely off track, but you mentioned Fair Trial Free Press traveling around the state, and you reminded me of the few occasions when the Court of Appeals went on the road.
Absolutely, and that was a real treat because the Court of Appeals has its beautiful home in Albany and traditionally has sat only there. The court, as a court, gathers only there, and the official business of the court is done only there. But if you just think in parts of the state, I've told you that Albany law school students don't come to the court. You can imagine in other parts of the state, in Buffalo, out on Long Island, and all around the state, that the court would be unfamiliar except for the few cases that would impact their finances or their property or their citizens. So at one point we made a decision that we would go on the road. Once a year we would go on the road. And that met with enormous success. I'll never forget the time we were in Brooklyn at the Borough Hall. We were at Brooklyn Borough Hall. And I remember the line to get in went all the way down the stairs and out the door. We've never had that in the city of Albany. But we've always had a tremendous reception when we come, and we try to pick the cases that relate particularly to that part of the state. The court was in each of the departments even when I was the chief judge, so I don't know whether they're traveling back. This is just another one of those incidents where, another one of those instances where the impact of the budget, it just hits so hard that you stop thinking of things that in any way add to the expense, and it was an expense to go. I don't mean travel expense. I mean moving the business of the court someplace else. That was an effort. So anything that adds pennies these days, when people are losing their jobs, and when people have to clear out at 4:30 and finish their business, there's just a disinclination, and I guess the word is dispiriting. It's very dispiriting. And if you're on the dispiriting subject, and I know you're planning to ask me about it, it's salary. So talk about dispiriting, and talk about tragedies. I mean, there you've got something that was a real punch in the gut for the New York State court system, the salary issue, and for the chief judge. I've spent a good deal of time describing the design of our system of government, the importance of the independence of the judiciary. I cannot imagine that the founders, the framers, the drafters of the Constitution could ever have conceived that things would go so awry in the state of New York with respect to its regard for its own judiciary, to have what happened happen. And they were 12, 13, let's say I was chief judge 15 years. Overwhelmingly, the years I was chief judge were clouded, scarred, deteriorated by the salary issue. Really so sad that we were treated with such disdain by our partners in government. And just to give you the nub of it, and not to well, maybe the best thing I could do is to tell you about the New York Times on July 20, 2007. This will kind of capture the whole situation. Here we are supposed to be an independent branch of government, treated fairly, treated with respect. Nobody goes on the bench to be rich, but you do have family. You have to eat and live, and family to support. That day, I forget the day of the week it was, but July 20, 2007 engraved in my mind, because we battled all through the 12 Pataki years and with Governor Spitzer as well. The issue didn't arise with Governor Cuomo because periodically the judges had received raises, and what would happen would be every few years the legislature would give the judges a raise, which was cover for their getting a raise, and we did get one in those early years with Governor Cuomo, but there was that solid, locked-in linkage. And that newspaper that day says it all. It's the front page, it's the right-hand lead, and you don't need to be a journalist to know that that's the news of the day. The right-hand lead of the newspaper announced that a deal had been struck between Governor Spitzer and the legislature of the state of New York. That was the lead paragraph for the most comprehensive ethics reform since the end of Watergate. And the article went on and on and on to describe the great success of Governor Spitzer in achieving this ethics reform. Still on the front page, toward the bottom of the column, was a quote from Governor Spitzer saying, now that he's gotten from the legislature the most comprehensive ethics reform ever, he is prepared to consider raises for the legislature. Now the subtext of that is that if the legislature could get a raise at last, the legislature couldn't get a raise from Governor Pataki, couldn't get a raise from Governor Spitzer unless. But if the legislature would get a raise, then the judges could have a raise too. Is that any kind of sensible system? Does that make a bit of sense? Robert, does that make a bit of sense to you?
Not much.
Well, needless to say, though it was the right-hand lead of the newspaper announcing that a deal had been struck, and though I did in fact receive telephone calls the day before, both from Governor Spitzer and from the Speaker of the Assembly, Shelley Silver, saying, see, we got you the raises. Finally, all that complaining and Shelley Silver said to me, I told you I wasn't going to let him leave the room without a handshake on the raises. We got the raises. So the deal was the governor got campaign finance reform, ethics reform. The legislature got its raises, and yes, you judges down there in the pits, you can have one too. Well, needless to say, maybe it escaped notice, but the legislature wasn't in session in Albany on July 20, 2007, and the legislature never voted the ethics reform that Governor Spitzer was celebrating on July 20, and therefore the legislature couldn't get its raises, and therefore the judges couldn't get their raises. End of story. And I think that kind of encapsulates what went on for the 12 years before, when on innumerable occasions Governor Pataki would bring the house down of judges, applauding wildly, how great, how great, how great, because he always was for raises for the judges. But there was a ... that wasn't part of his formal speech, which was, but no raises for the legislature. And as long as there would be no raises for the legislature, there would never be any raises for the judges. So that's what happened to us for 12, 13 years, with an absolutely frozen salary, which was hardly the end of the world to begin with. And I must say, in the holiday season of 2011, there was what I celebrated as a miracle. It was the final days of Governor David Patterson. We had proposed a commission. Judge Lippman and I had proposed a commission. That was obviously the sensible thing to do, to take this out of the hands of the legislature. It can't be that you get raises if we get raises. It can't be.
You said 2011.
Yes. In the closing day, 2010, I'm so sorry, the end of 2010, just in the final days of Governor David Patterson, when this commission system went into effect. So now we have the structure. There was the first round. There's now a commission every 4 years that will, an independent commission, there's provision for an independent commission that will meet every 4 years to consider the issue of salaries for the judges, independent of issues for the raises for the legislature. And what they decide will be the law. What that commission decides will be the law, unless it is affirmatively overridden by the legislature. So I say I celebrated it as a miracle of the holiday season, and I hope that in fact it proves to be one. But at least we have the prospect, we have a ray of sunshine that we are released from the horrors that the judges had to endure for all these years.
Do you want to mention Jalka?
I'll mention Jalka because we are in the month of October of 2011, and October, among other things, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And probably 15 or more years ago, Jalka stands for Judges and Lawyers Breast Cancer Alert, and maybe this just shows the total range of amazing opportunities one can have as the Chief Judge of the state of New York. We were terribly distressed at some point many years ago for news that seemed to be gaining a momentum of so many of our colleagues diagnosed with breast cancer. And the question, and it was Judge Sandra Miller who raised it with me one day, isn't there something we can do to raise awareness of breast cancer? We convened at the Harvard Club, about a dozen of us, and that was the start of JALCA. Today, my goodness, it would take me another hour to tell you about JALCA. We're going to meet
What does that stand for?
JALCA stands for Judges and Lawyers Breast Cancer Alert. We're meeting at the end of this month. Always in October we meet. We have a symposium, sometimes at the City Bar Association. Last year we had it at Sloan Kettering. We've had it at both places. Focused on a law issue. It's a panel of judges and whatever the subject is, experts. It could be insurance law, it could be environmental law, it could be privacy law, these employment issues. These are all, legal issues, and the judges question the experts about these issues, and Dr. Larry Norton and I preside over the panel, as I expect to do on October 31st. At the City Bar Association, for which continuing legal education credit is given, because it is a legal education subject, although people come not to hear me or the panel, they come to hear Dr. Larry Norton, one of the great physicians and great breast cancer specialists who does state of the medicine. It's kind of state of the medicine and state of the law. But I think in order to be thematic about this, Robert, there is something thematic about this. Well, all of the things that you're asking me, and especially outrageous as it may seem to be talking about breast cancer when you're talking about the history of the Court of Appeals and the tenure of the Chief Judge of the court and of the state of New York. I think one thing that the Chief Judge is able to do is to convene people around a good idea. To convene good people around a good idea, serious people, whether it's reform, in some statutory reform. I know you yourself are involved in, you're an appointee to this commission that's looking at the civil practice, the criminal procedure law, or whether it's courthouse construction, or whether it's a family court task force, or or whether it's how we can be instrumental, as we are, in raising awareness of breast cancer, including, I might say, having mammogram vans at the courthouses during the month of October, where we have tens of thousands of people every single day. We now have mammogram vans that are paid for as a result of these JALCA dinners and other contributions from private citizens. Or we can convene around adoption, or how many subjects have we discussed? Dozens, and we can. It's the power to think hard and convene people around issues that need attention. I think that is probably the thematic and unique quality for the Chief Executive Officer of the state court system.
Before we leave the subject of the Court of Appeals and the tenure of the Chief Judge, obviously judging is a very serious business, but can you tell us a little bit of the lighter side of life at the court?
Oh, goodness. Well, I told you there was always such a good spirit and good humor, and I'm sure you've gotten a taste of it as we've gone through these various subjects. But I'll just give you one story. I guess we could do hundreds of stories, but the one that pops immediately to mind, which is the one I'll stay with, is that at these, you know that we would have dinner together every night, the 7 judges of the Court of Appeals, and when there was a birthday, that sometimes would get a little cupcake or something, and everybody would sing happy birthday. But Judge Titone, and there are any number of wonderful, funny stories that could be told about Judge Vito Titone. But Judge Titone discerned that at Jack's, and we frequently went to Jack's, they would bring a whole birthday cake if it was somebody's birthday. So you just never knew. You were always at risk, and they must have gotten onto it at Jack's. But I mean, there were years that I had 5 and 6 birthdays, and that we all did. You know, you'd have to look surprised as the cake was brought over, and everybody, the waiters and all, would sing happy birthday. But they had to have known that we were getting more than one birthday a year. That's just one tiny story, and there are so many I could tell because I've told you about the joy of it, and I think I will leave it at that.
What have you been doing since you left the court?
Well, here's what happened to me. I made a conscious decision that I was not going to spend 1 minute of my time as chief judge thinking about what I would do when I was not chief judge. Does that make any sense? No. Because also it was important for me, given the death of my husband, that I leave no time between the end of my tenure and the start of anything else I was going to do. I think had Stephen been alive, obviously, we would have traveled. I would have talked to people, but I didn't want to travel alone, and I can't say I didn't spend any time talking to people, because I did reach out to maybe 1 or 2 people, but I didn't want to make it a big deal. I thought maybe the Obama administration, I thought of something in public service, which was the natural next step. And I did put out a couple of feelers and through my friend Marian Wright Edelman, but I don't think the administration was up to children in the first days of the administration. They've certainly gotten into those issues now, more than 2 years later. But my friend Ellen Shaw put me in touch with a foundation lady, very nice lady in her 70s, and I only mention that because she said to me, "You're too old, forget it." Those are her exact words, and she was a foundation headhunter, so that was a pretty credible kind of thing. Meanwhile, you know, I had lived in law firms for 21 years, and I reached the point as chief judge when law firms were, every time I picked up the phone and it was a law firm, they said, "And by the way, don't do anything without talking to us." So I just knew there would be lots of law firm opportunities, although I didn't imagine that as my life. And I did allow 1 or 2 that were especially dear to me, either because I had been there before or because my late husband had been there. But Skadden said, in effect, "Come here and do what you want to do." And boy, that was powerful. That was a really powerful invitation. Not that I really knew what I wanted to do, but the only thing I was sure of is that I didn't want 1 minute to lapse between the time I closed the doors behind me at my chambers and started work the very next day. That was just to be the formula, no downtime. So I showed up at Skadden in this, I guess it's just about little over 2 years ago. They've been very welcoming and very nice to me, and I'm now living in the law firm world, which I have to tell you surprises a lot of people, as it surprises me. I said, had I thought about it, I'm not sure this is what I would have done. I think it was a very fortunate thing for me to come here for a place in the universe, because when you're a Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, you get stationery that says retired, you have your chambers at the courthouse, you have your staff, you can sit at other courts. I read about Justice Souter sitting all over the place, and Justice O'Connor is fantastic. I've just read Justice Stevens' book. I mean, it's just a whole different thing. When you leave as Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals of the State of New York, boom, it's over. And as I have used the expression several times, the slate is wiped clean. All those wonderful Bar Association and legal aid and all of that stuff I did before I went on the court, when I was Chief Judge, I wasn't about to do any of those things. So you arrive like day of birth, right? In a new universe, which is, it's not like you can wander down the corridor. I would open the door and go in and put your feet up and talk about the rule against perpetuities, like I used to do in my old life. That's not how law firms work today. Everybody's on the computer, and everything is just very kind of non-personal. So how has it worked out? And the line that I use and think about a lot is when I call to ask the Skadden firm how much I owe them, which I do frequently because of private car service or postage or things like that. And I finally figured that the answer is a lot, a huge amount, because while it's taken me a long time to find this life, it's okay. It's good. I'm in the world of arbitration, and very interesting, and there's a lot to do in arbitration. And in a sense, for women, international arbitration, remember I told you about where I was in 1962 when I entered the profession? In 1993 when I became chief judge. I think in the world of international arbitration, I think women are just kind of a new entity there too. It's in many ways not so, but in many ways is so. And some, I've been very fortunate to have been called upon by officials to help in some investigations that have gotten some notoriety. Some you know about, and some you don't know about.
Well,
and
let's talk about the ones we know about.
I will not tell you about those. But what I really want to tell you about, what's to me has made such a huge difference and makes me so especially happy, is that I have been able to pursue my interests in children and education and adolescence, the things I really thought in the abstract that I would do, in a place that is immensely supportive of pro bono and pro bono initiatives. And I have been very happily working toward on a number of projects in the field. And I have to tell you that being in this place, bringing people here, it adds a dignity that I think I mentioned this before to the project that I'm very happy to have. And I know, I have very firm support of the firm support in every respect. So it's been a bit of, kind of reflection and waffling and the ups and downs of being in a new universe and a new life, and absolutely knowing that there can never be anything on earth to replicate my years as a judge of the Court of Appeals, let alone my years as Chief Judge of the State of New York. Nothing could ever come close to that. But please be assured that I have a real good life.
And you mentioned the arbitration. You mentioned a little bit about the school justice initiative you're working on. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about what that is and how that's working.
Well, I think what I feel good about right now is that first of all, this has been a tremendous interest of mine through the Permanent Judicial Commission on Justice for Children. I told you we changed our lens from 0 to 3 to adolescence as kind of a last clear chance. And the Commission has been working on projects around adolescence. And lo and behold, the sea has changed around us. I think it's just so terrific that I pick up the paper every day and I see a task force on out-of-state placements for young children and how damaging that is. I see the state of Texas, which has 900,000 pieces of data on children from the 7th grade through graduation and beyond about the effects of school discipline on children. I see this brain research on adolescent children. It seems to me that the air is alive with interest in reaching out to adolescents to keep them out of our prisons, out of our courts. The only way you get to prison is through the court. So when I say keep them out, nobody goes voluntarily. So keep them out of the courts, keep them in their schools. Let's figure out what to do with them after that, but keep them in their schools. And it's very exciting to me that as we have been pursuing this path, that it's just bubbling all around us to the point where a foundation actually reached out to me. I still am not comfortable raising money. It's something I never had to do as a judge, and they came to me to ask to say that they would fund a nationwide summit. And I think they see what I've told you I see about my life as Chief Judge, which is my ability to convene the most knowledgeable people, dedicated people, to do something really important about this issue. And I've just thought of something else about my life today, which is immensely pleasurable for me, and that is I am a director of several institutions, maybe most notably Lincoln Center, which is in my neighborhood and in my heart. And what fun it is to go up to Lincoln Center and be part of the very exciting atmosphere up there.
Do you want to say a bit about the investigations that are known?
I guess there are 3 investigations that are known. The most recent was the investigation concerning the domestic violence incident that surrounded the last days and months of Governor Patterson's tenure. It was then Attorney General Cuomo, now of course Governor Cuomo, who asked me to head up that investigation, which I did with his office. Before that, I think the investigation was on behalf of the Working Families Party, which was under some difficult scrutiny. Even to the point of some involvement of the U.S. Attorney's Office, but all of that ended well for the Working Families Party, or at least for the moment has ended well for the working. You never know what lies ahead, right? And then maybe what consumed the most time of the 3, and the first public one that I can talk about, was the investigation on behalf of State University at Binghamton involving the basketball crisis with the basketball team. So those are 3 that I was pleased where I could be helpful. And in fact, ironically, that took me into the world of adolescence, or at least older adolescence. But those are 3 that I did.
So you're doing arbitrations, you're doing investigations, you're setting up justice initiatives, and you're also doing litigation, right?
Yes, some of that as well.
An interesting case in Nassau County?
Oh, that is an interesting case in Nassau County, yes, which involves that's been in the press, so again, I'm not revealing anything, but involves a financial control board that was established there. So if your point is life is full, I guess so. But when you think that, I describe my old life as 80% Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals and 80% Chief Judge of the State of New York, I need to fill 160% of the day, and I'm getting close.
Judge, you identified your children in the last session. Do you want to take this opportunity to immortalize your grandchildren in the historical record?
Yes, I want to immortalize my grandchildren in the historical record. My daughter Louisa is a lawyer. In fact, if I alerted her right now, we sometimes can move our shades up and down because she's in an office with similar shades diagonally across the street at the law firm of Pryor Cashman. She's a real estate attorney, a litigator, and she's on committees too, and leading a hectic life with her 3 children. Her oldest child, and in fact, thank you for reminding me, Robert, my granddaughter Sonia's 19th birthday is October 23rd, and I want to be sure to send off something today because she's at Colby College in Maine. She's just started there, and today's the 20th, so if I put something in the mail, it will get to Sonia in time for her birthday. Her younger sister, Andrea, is 17, and she's at the Hill School in Pottstown, looking at colleges right now. And her brother, my one grandson, the Prince, I call him, he's here in New York City. He goes to the Calhoun School, and we just celebrated his bar mitzvah in Israel. Then I have...
That's Ben.
That's Ben. And then 2 granddaughters of my son Jonathan, Sharon and Shayna. two granddaughters of my son Gordy, Amelia and Stella, and Nick is signaling something. Okay, I every morning, as this morning, I hear from the two. They live in Philadelphia, Sharon and Shayna,